You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma Podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatobi for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them. Do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by Hope is Alive. Hope is Alive exists to radically change the lives of drug addicts, alcoholics, and those who love them. Join us Saturday, September 30th for our Sobriety Sprint 5K as we remember, honor, and celebrate those who've lost their lives. This family-focused event will feature a 1-mile fun run, inflatables, food trucks, and more. Register to run or honor a loved one at sobrietysprint.com. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. We've been trying to do this episode for a while. It's almost a year, I think, since we actually met doing TedX together. Gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Mr TDoe, also known as TDoe.
Well, thank you for having me on the pod. I'm excited.
I am excited too. It's I was looking at the calendar. I was like, wow, it was like just over a year ago, I think, when we did the TedX Oklahoma City, and doing that was nerve-wracking, and thanks to David for the opportunity because it was fantastic. Yeah. I'd love to do it again, and just kind of seeing the group that we had. We had so many impactful stories and so many great stories, and everybody's story was super unique. And now it'll live on YouTube forever. Some of us have, some of those videos have done okay, and some of those, like yours, have gone stratospheric, which I love. Which I think there's people that like for myself, like I took the opportunity. It was definitely a bucket list thing. It was something that I can say I've done, and it's great. And I think people like yourself took it and like, this is what I meant to do, right? I meant to go on stage, I meant to speak to people, I meant to share a message. And that is exactly what you've done in the last year. And I love it. I love seeing it. I love the video climbing in views. I mean, it was just meant to be. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But as you know, we got to go through, set some context and get through a little bit of timeline here. So tell me a little bit about you, man. Were you born and raised in Oklahoma?
Yes, I'm an Oklahoma boy. Okay. So I grew up in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, just north of Tulsa. And then went to the University of Oklahoma, and then moved to Oklahoma City, got a job at Sandridge Energy, doing community outreach and employee care there. And then after Sandridge, started a tech company with one of my brothers, Chris. And that's what we kind of do full time now, is run that tech company. So
yeah. Why OU from Bartlesville?
Man, you grow up in Oklahoma, and it's a little bit of like OU, OSU, and so I kind of grew up an OU fan, and my older sister went there, and just kind of had some friends, and so it's kind of between OU, kind of this big campus, and then my family has some history at a small Christian school in Illinois called Greenville College. Okay. And so my grandpa was a professor there for 100 years. My uncle was a professor. Like all my uncles, my mom went there, and so it was kind of a family thing between kind of this really small school school and then OU, and just didn't feel like I could really do the small school thing. I really wanted to do the kind of the big campus feel, and had some other friends going to OU, and so made that decision that way.
Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do when you left high school to go to university, and just no? You started a tech company. Were you into tech early on?
I think my family in general, like my dad and then even my brothers, we've kind of always liked technology. I grew up with a computer in the house. But my brother would be the one who is definitely he's the one who codes and has built the app. I do all the marketing, and I'm more of a people person. So I studied human relations at OU, and so that was my main focus. And there's kind of at OU there's human resources and human relations. Human resources is in the business school. Human relations is in arts and sciences, and a lot of people go into nonprofit work who kind of go through that major. So didn't know what I wanted to do when I got there. Stumbled onto human relations and was like, oh, this is all about people, connections, communication, group dynamics, and even youth and families and things like that. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Does that come from kind of being involved in youth ministry growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I was involved in the church youth ministry, but I would probably say it kind of stems from, I would say, my mom and my dad, and then even my grandparents. I mean, I grew up in a home where there was kind of a legacy of care and like acknowledging and seeing and caring for people. And I saw that in my grandpa for many years, and my grandmother, and then even my parents. My mom just retired recently as a family practice physician in Bartlesville, practiced there for 30 years. So I kind of got to see the way that she cared for people for a very long time, and like watch people grow up and care for people. And then my dad he's just hilarious, and so he's always talking with people. I can remember growing up and seeing him on stage at church doing the church announcements, and just being like really witty and funny with it, and like connecting with the people who are at the church, and then just seeing how he kind of moved and served in our community. So I definitely had kind of these beacons, these people in my life who have always kind of encouraged me to care for others, and then that really aligned with human relations at OU.
Yeah, you think I want to do this, I want to get, if I'm going to go to school. And I guess at the time when we go to university as an 18, 19-year-old, yes, we kind of have some idea, but we're also kind of like, we're very flexible at that time, right? We're like, oh, this sounds good, or this sounds good. Like and also you got time at that age.
Yeah.
It's different if you're kind of like 35, 40, and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I should still figure that out. But when you're 18, 19, you can kind of like, honestly, I think until you're 30, you can figure it out, right? Just do and try stuff. So it was nice that you kind of had that opportunity and human relations popped up. Do you remember like the day that you were like, yeah, I'm going to do human relations?
No. I have a terrible memory. No, I don't really even remember how I found it, honestly. But once I got there, interacted with some amazing professors. One of my favorite professors is now the dean there, and just spent time with him, and we grabbed lunch semi-frequently and just keep up with him. So he was definitely, there were people that I bumped into at the University of Oklahoma that really impacted kind of my trajectory on kind of where I am today. So
yeah. Big into the football scene when you were in school?
Freshman year, it kind of like tapered a little bit. It's like you go early with your freshman year, and then it's like, man, I'm not going to go as early my sophomore year. Then by senior year, it's like, if I'm there, maybe by kickoff we're good. So I'm not like a super diehard football guy. I go to a game every year, every few years, but
So when you're doing you're doing human relations, right? You're in human relations in university. You kind of fall in love with it. It's something that you're comfortable doing because you've seen family do it, and it's about people, and just comes naturally to you. And you do that for a full 4 years, right? You commit to it. When do you know, like during kind of the human relations kind of 4-year period of like, okay, what are the jobs that I can actually go into, and what is the work that I can do? Because obviously your college timeline's running out, and you're like, I need to get a job, I need to build a career, I need to make money and have a life. People listening probably don't think there's a lot of money in human relationships. In relations, right? As a job. So
a lot of people go into nonprofit work, which is not highly paid. So when I was at OU, I started a campus organization called Reach, and we would do community service, like fun community service projects. And so I started and led that for 3 years. And some of the things we do is like, we'd go and buy a whole bunch of pizza and deliver and eat with the people who had to clean the stadium after a football game. So for the night games, their lunch break was like 2 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And this is a lot of like temp workers, so like transportation's an issue, and like there's not a whole lot of places open to eat, and so we would just buy a ton of like pizza shuttle and get that delivered and just hang out with the people who are cleaning and just say, hey, thank you. Yeah. Like we know we trashed this place during game day.
It's 80,000 people.
80,000 people just dropping stuff, right? And then you are the people who have to come behind, and so we just want to say thank you and meet you and all that. We did a senior citizen prom where we'd go to a senior living home and play the best hits of the 50s and 60s, and we'd crown a senior prom king and queen, and both for like the kind of the elderly as well as college, and we had a prom photo booth, and it was just a bunch of fun, just like college students just like getting creative and having fun serving. And kind of the last thing that we kind of continued as a tradition was a fast food Valentine's.
Okay.
And so this was something that we did on Valentine's Day, where we'd go and buy a whole bunch of cards and chocolates and roses and deliver them to ladies who were working at fast food restaurants in Norman. So we'd hit every fast food restaurant in Norman and just kind of roll up and be like, hey, we're thinking about you. Happy Valentine's Day. Here's this, you know. And it was really great. The first few times, as you kind of roll through the drive-thru and you're like, yo, how many ladies are working? And they're like, like none? Like, who's this creeper, you know? But as we kind of, you know, got there, it started to work out, and we were met with, you know, tears and right. You know, giving hugs and just saying, hey, we care about you. Thank you for the work you do. Yeah. You know, we roll through Taco Bell at all hours of the night. I know you see the craziest things. And so we just say, hey, we're thinking about you. So that has been going on for the last, you know, 15 plus years at this point.
So you continued, after university, that's the one you guys continued to do, and kind of brought that back to your neighborhood in Oklahoma City. And so the whole Reach thing, was that like a class project? Was that a personal project for you while you were doing, like, was there anything to do with your degree?
That's a great question. Yes and no. So the answer would be no. I wanted to, I've always had a heart for people, love serving, did some stuff in high school. Like, I just love creatively serving people. And so that kind of spurred into college. I met some guys I was in a fraternity, and I met some guys who kind of had the same heart of like, hey, let's serve, let's do some fun stuff while we're here. Like, we feel like we kind of live in this bubble, especially kind of in the Greek system. And we want to get outside that bubble. And so that's what kind of led to coming up with these creative ways. And then would partner with the human relations department, and students would get extra credit for coming to these service opportunities. So that's kind of the overlap, but it didn't start because of that. And then handed Reach off to another guy who was passionate about serving the community. But yeah, Fast Food Valentine's was the thing that was kind of like, hey, let's continue to do this. This is just really fun. It kind of grew to some other cities, and some other groups kind of picked it up. And then my youngest brother went to Baylor and did it with his friends down there. So it's kind of cool to kind of see that kind of kindness spread one drive-through at a time. So
and that's kind of like, it was like a little bit about, you know, what kicked off your TEDx talk, right? Was like, you had a moment during one of those fast food kind of Valentine's nights, and what I thought was hilarious too was like, you went all out. You guys dressed up, got a limo. Like, it wasn't just like you're rolling through in someone's truck. Like, you guys were dressed to the nines, like, you know, penguined up, dicky bow, you know, the whole bow tie and thing, and because the guys would get excited about it. So when you come back to Oklahoma City and you start doing that, like, it seems like most people in college will have jobs and stuff now. So it's, you go back to kind of like your roots and helping youth and stuff, and find like kids to do it with you.
Yeah. So
I say kids, they're probably like, you know, 16.
Yeah.
Right. Kids to us.
Yes. So to kind of backtrack a little bit, so after college, got a job, and we'll kind of circle back how this happened, but got a job at an energy company here in Oklahoma City doing community outreach. Okay. So they allowed me to work in schools on the east side of Oklahoma City. So I, in partnership with another company, we'd have two of us do these kind of school-wide assemblies. So we'd go into these schools, we'd have a positive word of the month. We call it the hot seat. And so we had this stool that we painted red. We had a hot seat wrap, a hot seat mailbox where kids could like write us postcards. We're just there to like encourage students, right, and build relationships with students and teachers and families in the community. And so that was something that I did for many years, probably 6 or 7 years, of like 3 assemblies a week at multiple schools on the east side, just building relationships. And I found a kind of just naturally found this core group of guys, and we started spending time together. I'd go to their basketball games, started to know their families. We'd go to Thunder games and baseball games and just kind of spending time together, right? And so at that point, man, they were in like 2nd grade when I met them, and they're now like 21, it's like 22, they're doing their thing. But when they kind of got to middle school, they found out about fast food Valentines.
Okay.
And so we're like, yo, TDoe, like, we want to do this, right? And so before that, we hadn't really been dressing up. We hadn't done the limos. But when the guys wanted to like get involved, it was like, man, let's step this up, and like, why not? And so we rented tuxedos, rented a limousine, kind of stepped up our gift baskets, and we went around to places in Oklahoma City and delivered those. And so
awesome.
Kind of their acts of kindness landed them on the front page of the Oklahoman, and kind of the news stations came and covered it. And so they were like the big dogs at the school the next day of being on the front page. Their teachers showed the news program, in class. And so they were it.
When you look forward to that once a year, right? It only happens once a year.
Yeah.
Just knock it out and just kind of do that.
And so we have a blast. And obviously, I mean, I see them throughout the year, but just kind of the excitement builds around the beginning of the year. And then we have to go get fitted for tuxedos, and, we're dancing at Men's Warehouse and like just doing the whole thing, right? Like, we have a blast. And we always go out to eat before, and we handwrite and sign these postcards or these cards for the ladies. And so there have been a few of the women who have been there multiple years, like at Dairy Queen. We stop at this On Cue at Wendy's, and so they're like, oh, we remember we were hoping you were coming back this year. Or we went into a Dairy Queen, and one of the ladies was like, I knew you would be back this year, And so just like, and it gets emotional sometimes, right? It's just like, hey, we think about you, we care about you, thank you, and then we're on to our next spot. So.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, in your TEDx, and for people listening, I will link your TEDx talk in the description down below. So after this, you can kind of go listen to it. But there was a significant moment, right? You sat in the back of the limo, and you had this significant moment with Demarian, who was at our TEDx talk. And has he graduated OU yet?
No, he's
still at OU.
Sophomore.
Okay, he was going to OU, I think maybe last year then. And kind of, it was just a huge moment, right? And it was probably just at the time, you're working for Sandridge, you're having fun with the guys, you're doing what you want to do, community outreach, you're getting pay, you're having a good time, you're giving back. It seems like a dream job right now for you at that time.
For sure.
But then you get floored by this comment, right? By this moment.
Yeah.
So, tell the people of how that moment happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back to the tuxedos, I think there's something special that happens when you wear a tuxedo, right? When you get dressed up, you feel like $1 million, right? And so we're wearing tuxedos, we're in the back of this limousine, and so our conversation changes a little bit when you dress up, right? And so we're talking about making fake business deals and making money, right? We're kind of dreaming about the future just because we're in this tuxedo and feeling good. And so Demarion looks at me. We call him DJ. DJ looks at me and he's like, TDoe, I want one of the good jobs when I get older. How do people get the good jobs? How do people become successful? And I didn't have an answer for him in that moment. I knew that my story was complex, and I wanted to give him kind of a truthful answer. And so I kind of froze in the moment. And luckily Burger King saved me. We kind of pulled up to our next spot, and the guys hopped out. And so kind of by the time they got back, conversation had changed. And but that question really stuck with me was, hey, how do people get the good jobs? I want this. I'm ambitious. How do people become successful? And so that kind of led me down doing these interviews of people.
Yeah. So
and their stories.
Yeah. So who do you start interviewing? Just friends, random people? How do you? What leads you, I guess, to learn more about people and their stories?
Yeah. So I mean, that was kind of DJ was kind of the core kind of catalyst for like, man, let me interview stories so I can go back to these guys and give them an answer of how people become successful. So I kind of posted about it, and people signed up for times for me to interview them, like via Zoom, phone call, in person, and then from there it kind of spiderwebbed to some people that I didn't know, like friends of friends and stuff. And so I would interview them about these kind of moments. So I'll just kind of share a few, and we'll see if we can kind of find the commonality here. But I interviewed a guy named Jackson, who was a filmmaker. So he kind of shares his highlight, and he was kind of just saying, hey, I worked hard to learn film, and then I produced this award-winning music video, and he kind of talked about that success. Yeah. And then there was another lady, Rebecca, who worked hard. She said that she worked hard to graduate from college and then got a good job at this PR firm. And then the last one of the other interviews was with Trevor, and he's an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, and he's like, man, I worked hard and quit my job and then built this successful business. And so the thing that kept coming up in every single one of these interviews was hard work. And I was like, man, we hear that all the time, and we tell our young people that, but there was something fascinating that kind of kept coming up in every single one of these interviews. It was this one phrase that kind of hid the keys to success, and that was, and then. And then it showed up in every one of my interviews, right? It was Jackson who said, hey, I worked hard and then won this music video award. But what he doesn't say was that his Aunt Rose bought him his first camera. Right. And so that was kind of hidden under that and then phrase. Rebecca said that she worked hard, which was true, and then got a good job. But what she doesn't initially say and tell to the public is that she was dating this guy in college, and his dad was the GM at that PR firm that helped her get an internship, which turned into a full-time job. And then lastly, Trevor, he did work hard and then started this business. And in the story he doesn't really share publicly until we kind of dug a little bit deeper, was that his in-laws owned some rental property and allowed him and his wife to live rent-free for a stint while they were building the business, right? So it was less of an expense, less stress mentally, so they can focus on getting this business off the ground. And so I call those and then moments. And so these are kind of people in our lives who unlock resources, knowledge, and opportunity for us to kind of take the next step.
Yeah. So then you start looking at your own life and where's
100%.
mine, right?
100%.
You start seeing all
I can do mine quickly. I'd love to hear a few of yours, but at the beginning of the podcast, she's like, hey, tell us a little bit about yourself. I grew up in Bartlesville and then went to OU. Well, what I don't typically tell people in sharing the details is that my parents could afford for me to go there. Sure. Right. So I didn't really have the balance of like, man, do I have to do all this stuff? I need a scholarship. Thinking through this, I had some flexibility there to be able to make this decision. Very fortunate of that. But that was one of my and then moments. And then while I was at OU, I said I was in the Greek system a little bit, but I had a roommate. His name was Daniel, and he would volunteer with us for that organization I started, right? And Daniel's mom was senior vice president of HR at Sandridge Energy, where I got to do community outreach. So she calls and says, hey, what are you doing after school? She knows about Reach, that in the stuff we're doing. She's like, you're doing some cool stuff. I want to introduce you to this guy named Greg, who oversees our community outreach. I don't know if anything will happen. You guys just need to meet, right? And so I go and meet with Greg. We hit it off, and that turned into a summer internship, which turned into a full-time job, and then. Yeah. So those are a few of my many and then moments that I wanted to share kind of just at the beginning of the pod.
Yeah, because you're right. Like everybody can look back right at a connection at a like their dad knows someone or someone they met. Like for me, a lot of mine are like golf related, right? Like I wouldn't. For me, everything I can tie back in, everything I have pretty much in my life, I can generally tie it back to something golf related. I wouldn't be. I came to Oklahoma to play, at university, at Southern Nazarene University, played golf there and had a scholarship. I again had, fortunate that my dad saved up some money and had enough money for me to hire an agency to kind of put me out there to get, because that's how it works if you want to come to the States as a college athlete for every sport. And so, we fly up to Scotland and meet with this agency and they film a video and all the rest of it, right? Well, I get a phone call, it was kind of late in the semester because I had to put off. I'd signed to go to Florida, but my dad lost his job. Well, the company my dad worked for went out of business the month before I was about to go to school. So I'm like, well, the money we've saved to go, my semester is now gone, right?
Yeah,
so I put off school for another year. And 2 years actually, and so I get a phone call late April one year, April 2011. I graduated in 2009, so it's 2 years later. And this coach is like, I'd love to have you out here. And I'd never been to the States before, so I'm like, yeah, let's go. Obviously, where is Oklahoma? What is a Nazarene? I have no idea, right? So just jump on the plane, come out here. Me and my dad come out here. And I just it's miserably hot when we get here. It was that summer, it was over 100 for a record amount of days. I get off the plane in jeans and a hoodie, melting, right?
What is happening?
Get to school, and my golf clubs were late on missed the flight or whatever, and they showed up a couple of days later. But I look at I wouldn't be here. But the same thing, what I did again to that, I generally don't say is that I had a 50% scholarship my first year. For the other 50%, I was a member of 2 golf clubs back home, and golf is very cheap back home compared to here. What the average person pays a month here at a country club is what people pay per year back home.
Wow.
Right? And as a kid as well, it's a lot cheaper too. And I was fortunate to play for my country, and if you play for your country, you don't pay membership fees, right? So I didn't pay for golf back home basically, which out here people are like, oh my gosh, you had 2 memberships, and they're like, that's 2 countries, no, it's different. It was $500 a year max for 5 years.
Yes.
So both golf courses held fundraisers for me. We had a golf day, we had 2 golf days, and that raised the money that paid for my second semester, right? And it was, probably $15,000-$20,000.
Yeah.
Significant amount of money. So I don't really tell people that, right? So and then when I come here, I meet all these people, I'm having a great time. At the end of my 4 years, I want to stay in the country, right? I enjoy being here, I love being here, I don't want to go back to Wales. And there's a time when you're an international student, you can do a 1-year work visa. It's called OPT. And the only stipulation is you have to find a job that's within your degree field. I have a marketing degree. I could do anything, right?
Right.
So one of my professors is like, have you thought about doing real estate? I'm like, no, never thought about it. He goes, well, a guy who was on my college golf team, he also played for SNU prior to me. He said he's in real estate, you should meet him. So I go for coffee with this guy, and we talk about golf for 40 minutes, right? We talk about real estate for 5.
Yes.
And we're hanging out chatting, and he's like, well, what happens if, after 1 year, he's like, I don't doubt that the real estate company is going to hire you, especially for 1 year. The problem is, what happens after 1 year? When your visa ends, what are you going to do? Because it's a specific work visa, right? There's a student visa, you can work a little bit, but not a full-time work visa. So you have this for 12 months. And I said, well, I got kind of 3 options. One is I applied to be a graduate assistant for the golf team, become an assistant, and just kind of do my master's, right? I don't make any money, but they pay for me to do my master's.
Yes.
Second option is everything fails, I go home and I don't get to come back. Well, the third option is I get married. And I was totally joking, right? Being sarcastic. And he's like, well, are you single? I was like, yeah, I'm single. And I was about to graduate. This is April of my senior year. And he goes, well, my sister-in-law is single. And, I've heard about you for the time you've been in school. The kind of golf community is really kind of tight-knit around SNU Golf, and everyone kind of knows each other and keeps in touch of new teams. And he's like, I've heard a lot about you. You seem like a pretty cool guy. You seem like a pretty stand-up guy. Would you be interested in me introducing you to my sister-in-law? I was like, what does she look like? Super shallow Hal. What does she look like first, And he's I'd scope her out on Facebook and Instagram or whatever. And then we go on a date, a double date with his wife, which is her sister, and, Taryn. And we start dating, we hit it off, have a great time. But then that summer, I went home for 8 weeks that summer to play golf for Wales. So I left. We dated for 6 weeks, and then I left for 8 weeks. Yeah. So when I came back, we kind of stayed in touch and stayed as if we were in a relationship when we traveled, and FaceTimed every day and all that stuff. But I came back and I was like, I've been away for 8 weeks. That's a long time, right? Especially if you've only been dating for about 6. Yeah. And I kind of threw her in the deep end when I graduated. My parents came over, and she got to meet my parents and the whole thing. And I'd already met her parents as well. But later on, while I'm still working in real estate, my first year in real estate, I am working part-time at Oklahoma City Golf and Country Club. And the only reason I worked part-time at Oklahoma City Golf Country Club was, actually, there's two reasons. One, to get free golf at one of the best golf courses in the city.
100%.
And two, to be around people who can afford, 30, 40, however much it is, $1,000 to be a member there, right? You're around high-level people.
Yep.
And I got to play a lot of golf with those people because out of the guys who worked in the cart barn, I was probably like the one who really played golf the most. The other guys were just kind of like, we play golf, but it's just a job because our parents are members. And so I played a lot of golf with, I probably played more golf than I actually worked. And I kind of found a group of guys to play golf with. And one of those guys in the group was a patent trade attorney for the US government. So he's a lawyer. So we're playing golf one day after I'd come back, and we're talking about kind of my visa's ending, and this is kind of like late kind of November, December. There's like an odd, really good day. We were kind of nice to play golf in. And he's like, you should probably see an immigration attorney. I was like, yeah, you're probably right. Like, who said, I should? And he goes, well, I graduated in my law class was a lady named Kelly, and she's an immigration attorney in Oklahoma City. I was like, perfect. So sent me her contact information. And like a few months later, I'd kind of like I knew that like Taryn was the one. I'd gone to ask her parents. I had the conversation, right?
Love it.
And that was in January, and then in February, we set up a meeting to go see Kelly. And me and Taryn went to see Kelly together. And I hadn't proposed at this point, right? Her parents know, but like she doesn't know. And so we see Kelly, and Kelly's like, "Congratulations on your engagement." We're like, "We're not engaged yet." She's like, "Well, are you married?" She's like, "No." Just like, we just want information. This is kind of like how, like, we want to know how the process works. My visa ends, effectively like May 31st, and this is like the first week in February. And Kelly's like, okay, I'm going to tell it to you like as plain as possible because like you need to know how this is going to work. I'm not going to like BS around it. It takes 90 days to file all of the documents, right? So your timeline, right? So it takes 90 days to file all the documents, right? She's like, so you basically have to send everything off by March the 1st at the latest. And we're like, okay, what does that mean? She's like, you got to get married, like now. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I want to marry her, but like back home, my culture is to have a longer engagement. We don't. I have friends back home who were engaged for like 8 years, and then they bought a house and had a kid, and then got married. Like, it's not, marriage out here is a lot more significant, I think, of a deal. I think probably because of like religion and the whole, moving in together. Like, that's a big deal, right? Very traditional. Yes. Back home, it's not. And so, we drive from there, we FaceTime my parents, tell them. And my mom and dad are like, I mean, if Taryn's parents are okay with it, if Taryn's okay with it first, they
right.
get me ask
right. I haven't got to that stage yet.
I haven't got to that stage yet, right? So I've gone, so we drive straight to Taryn's parents' house, tell them, and basically, I say, look, I know you've given kind of me the blessing, but for me I could stay in the country, but for me to continue working, I had to get a new visa, right? And that's why we had to do it fast. I could have stayed, but I couldn't have worked. So I'm just like useless, dead weight at that time. So they kind of agreed to it. And so Taryn hasn't agreed yet. Like, she's like in the room the whole time. And so like this was on like the first week in February, and the following kind of like Saturday, I properly proposed. And then the following Tuesday, we got married in her parents' house, like super chill, super quiet. My parents aren't flying over. Her brother's in Alaska because he's working in the military. Like, no one. I wanted to keep it super small, So we do this whole kind of tiny little ceremony at her parents' house, and I'm like, I just despise a little bit like the whole like Valentine's, married, engagement time, right? Cliche. I just think it's super cliche, right? Or if you get engaged at Christmas, I'm like, you can find a better present than like a wedding ring. Come on, be a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
I got engaged on the 13th of February and married on the 16th of February.
Let's go.
Right? So, when you look back at that, like, I meet my wife because of one of my professors at SNU was a golfer, and his former teammate is a golfer and in real estate. That guy's sister-in-law is who he connects me to. I end up meeting and getting married to that girl. I'm working at Oklahoma City Golf Country Club. The guy who introduces me to my immigration attorney, like all of these and then moments, right? And that's just one story. Like, you look back, you got thousands of these stories.
Yeah.
So, we had a wedding, small wedding, and then a year later, we had like a proper wedding day where like she could walk down the aisle and do my parents are in town, like have like the proper photo wedding, right?
Yep.
But yeah, that was February of 2016, which is nuts.
That's a story.
It should be a movie.
And these are the types of interviews I was doing.
Right.
Like I love these types of stories. And so the thing that I'm thinking about right now is like, tell me about like, how did you get exposed to golf?
Yeah.
What was it like? The questions that come up in my mind are like, tell me about your first pair, like your set of golf clubs.
So I still have my first ever golf club. It's in my office, and I brought it here. It was given to me by my granddad. It is a wooden shafted. That's how old it is. It has a wooden shaft in it, 5-iron. And instead of having grooves in the face, lines for non-golfers, it has dots. Like, it's that old. And my granddad gave it to me when I was like 2 or 3 years old as a kid, and there's photos of me kind of swinging around the backyard with it. And somehow this thing has survived, 33 years, right? And I remember the time I went home from college one year. I said to my parents, like, where is my old golf? I'm like, first, where is it? Because it used to be kind of sat in the corner of my bedroom. She's like, oh, I think I gave it to your cousin. I was like, straight to my cousin's house. And it was like laying in the backyard. I'm like, taking this right now.
Exactly.
And then I kind of left it. And one time I just brought it home with me, and it's in my office now. And it's tiny, right? Like, it's 2 feet long, whatever.
But you grew up.
I grew up
around
my
the
granddad
sport.
was around golf, yeah.
Gotcha.
Because my granddad was a police officer. And so, like, because of being a police officer and a military policeman as well, like, he was kind of very good at what he was. Like, his nickname was Super Ted, Chief Superintendent of, like, our South Wales Police region. It's kind of like the Chief of Police, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
So, like, he got to me, and he was a Freemason as well. So, like, the whole secret handshake nonsense. If you're a conspiracy theorist, all that stuff.
That's another podcast.
Yeah, that's another podcast for your tinfoil hat. But he was involved in all that. So he was a member of the golf club, and he kind of got me into golf. And then my dad started, like, before I really started, like, wanting to play golf, I was probably like 5 or 6. My dad started 6 months before I did. So my dad got into it as well, right? Because of my granddad and his dad as well played a little bit. So 6 months before I started playing, my dad was joining a golf club with this group of friends. And then for my 8th birthday, because the golf club, the first golf club I joined, I couldn't join until I was 8. And this was not the same golf club my granddad was a member at. This was like a less prestigious golf club, if you want to say. And so I joined that for my 8th birthday, played golf all the time. And then I joined my second golf club where my granddad was playing when I was 14. Because I couldn't be a junior member until I was 14, and I couldn't go out and play on my own until I was 14. They were kind of like super strict and very traditional golf stuff. They still to this day have a men's and a women's entrance to the golf club. They have it's very it's less that the women can go in the men's entrance now. It's now the main entrance, but like at the time it was like men's and women's entrance, right? And I played there with my granddad for 2 years from my 12th to 14th birthday because I could play with him. I couldn't go out on my own. But when you turn 14, I actually joined myself. But I meet all these people. Like, golf is one of the greatest connectors ever, because especially if you're good at it, because you spend 4 hours or 5 hours with someone, and most of the time, especially out here, if you're at a golf club and you're playing with members, like, they can afford to be there, right? It's a little different back home because it's cheaper, but it's still, you're around, generally like successful people. So that kind of like taught me how to grow up, how to speak to older people, how to just carry myself in a way 100%. That like I'm a 14-year-old kid, and I'm playing with my granddad's 67-year-old friends. Like, yeah, they're cracking old jokes and dad jokes and probably being racist because that's how they were back in the day, right? Of all the, typical, I mean, this was 1990 in early 2000s, right? You think of the generation that were born in the 40s. And so like, I learned all this stuff, and I got to be around people and learned every cuss word in the book because golf is extremely frustrating. As well. But I met so many awesome people, and those people, from my 14th birthday all the way up till I was 21, like those connections led to raising a golf tournament for me, and raising money for me and having a golf tournament, or having a dinner or whatever it was, and just kind of being involved. And yeah, like I look at the golf world now, and everybody I talk to, I'm like, go work at a country club. One, the country clubs need people to work at. It's really not that hard to just load bags and drive golf carts around. Yeah, it's hot in the summer, but it ain't that bad. Especially like, and I wouldn't just like go to Lake Efron and go to a public golf course. Like, think about it, use your time, like go to a country club, right? And meet those people. And the good thing about America and in Oklahoma and the States and all that stuff is like, they're very entrepreneurial driven. So if if you're an older guy, you're in your 40s, your 50s, you're a country club member or whatever, and you see some kid out there just grinding, just busting his ass, like working, like running around, like on time, looks good, like takes care of himself, like you respect that. They see a little bit of themselves in that. So then they just strike up a conversation, learn basic conversation skills, and just kind of like learn how to play golf. If you're great at golf, like it opens a lot of doors. Like, and it's something you can do till you die. Which helps too. So
the question that kept coming up was like, what happens when you don't have access to those types of relationships, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm talking with young men who are on the east side, which is a part, for the listeners who are not from Oklahoma City, is a part of Oklahoma City that's kind of historically been excluded. For in regards to race and different things like that. And so it's predominantly black, predominantly low income. People who don't live on the east side typically classify the east side by all of its kind of negative characteristics rather than its positive characteristics that it has. And so that was the question that coming up is like, I kept hearing these stories, but what happens if you don't have these relationships that unlock the doors? And so those are things that kind of come up is, sometimes, it's just like it feels like we might say, hey, just go work here, but even how you get that right is some of those nuances of like, well, let's talk about transportation, right? Like how do you get there? Well, how'd you get your first car? Right. It's like, and how'd you learn how to play golf? Right there, that's an expensive sport, so for people who kind of have been economically left out, can't afford to play golf, and develop those skills and understand there's like nuance and kind of rules to the game, right? And like once again, kind of that speak that you talk on the golf course or what you do, there's kind of a culture around golf that if you didn't grow up with it can seem foreign. And so when you're in that space, it's like I don't really know what to do, which then changes the dynamics, right, of the relationship. And so I think there's a lot of nuance 100%. There, and even it's fascinating because it kind of reminds me of Rebecca's story, kind of back in the pod where she got that job at that PR firm. Well, later in her interview, she was telling me that they went out on an intern lunch, and it was 10 interns who were sitting around the table, and she was like, the girl next to me slipped up and said that her dad worked with Gary, and that's how she got the internship. And then she was like, well, then the guy to my right said, well, I went to school with Abigail, and that's how I'm here. And they went around the table, and all 10 people had similar stories, right? And so that when I heard that, I was like, for some people, for a certain percentage of our country, and we can say Oklahoma, kind of bring it here, is like that's how life works, right? But there's a big percentage of people who that doesn't work. That's a locked opportunity, because what I heard was like, if you don't know someone who knows somebody, you're not getting that internship. And even so
just that shot
or that shot, that chance, right? And so I'm not calling out any country clubs or anything, but you did mention it's like, hey, some of the members' kids, work here, so that's a percentage of the jobs, is like who is actually getting these shots at the opportunity is what I've been able to kind of talk about since this TED Talk of kind of the fascinating nuance of how people get these opportunities, and kind of even talking about, you talked about your grandfather and kind of this legacy of and then moments that get passed down from generation that are really hard to see, and that was my grandpa's story. Was I interviewed him before he passed away, and he shared a little bit about how he got this good job at this gas pump factory, and he got paid enough that he could go to college and not have to work during school. So I said, well, Grandpa, tell me about that job. I was like, did you apply? Did you submit a resume? And he's like, no, my next door neighbor was the hiring manager, and he'd seen me grow up, was like, and I was a hard worker. He saw my paper route, all of that, and gave me a shot. And he was like, we didn't have enough money back then, so he'd actually take me to and from work, and got to get to know him. He became a mentor, all of that. Well, I'd never heard that story, and I did some additional research, and I found the 1940 census data, and I found the name of my grandpa's next door neighbor who unlocked that opportunity, and his name is Ray Simmons. And that was a name that I'd never heard before. And so I feel like my grandpa wasn't being malicious or sneaky or like trying to hide this detail from me. I just think it's the way that we've been trained to tell our stories, is that we leave out these important details of how people get to where we're at. So we just say, hey, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work hard, you need to have a little bit more grit, you need to dress it, you need to do these certain things, without telling kind of these additional details for these and then moments. And so that's what I've really been inviting people to. Well, as I did more research on my grandpa's story, I found another document that back in the day we practiced kind of these exclusionary housing practices, and it was known as redlining, which you can kind of look up. But essentially cities said, hey, we're going to draw on our map kind of these red lines where black people are going to live and can only live here, kind of in the worst parts of the city where industry is happening, water pollution, all this stuff, and that's where black people are going to live. Okay. And I found a document that said that no black or brown folks could live in my grandpa's neighborhood. And so when I saw that, I instantly I'll probably get a little emotional, I instantly got transported back to the limousine on Valentine's Day. And I thought about DJ, and I thought about his great-grandfather, that if he happened to live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where my grandpa lived, right, he couldn't even live next to Ray Simmons, right? Yeah. Like there's none of that kind of golf course bumping into each other opportunity, coming from that, because he's historically been left out of the equation. He can't live in that neighborhood. He can't go into these certain places. He can't golf at the golf course where opportunity lives and thrives. And so my brain and the conversation I want to have is like, what's like the residue from that, right? Like, what are we seeing today that because of 30, 40, 50 years ago, us excluding, and historically, us just excluding a certain population of people, what has that done for today? Right. And so those are really fascinating conversations that I hear, and really want to invite people to kind of share their and then moments. Right. Because what I see and what I want to create is kind of a more truthful narrative of how people get to where they're at, so that when our young people in our city are like, man, I want to sell real estate, right? And they see these YouTube videos where it's like, you can make $1 million, and if you have these properties and all this stuff, it's like nonsense. Right. And you're like, but you also didn't know that Mike got into real estate because he played golf and was introduced this way, right? Yeah. And so then he still worked hard. I'm not discrediting your story, but it was this relationship that unlocked this opportunity for you to learn more about it. Yeah.
And you're right. It still needs hard work, right? But it's the 100%. Opportunity, and everyone needs to work hard. But it's the opportunity that before that, you can work hard, but if you have no opportunity, your hard work's kind of just spinning your wheels, isn't it? And again, like you said, you need to train people to tell you these and then moments, because the reason I got the golf job was because a kid on my team worked at the golf course, and he was graduating and moving. And he's like, hey, I got someone who's going to replace me. Here he is. He's on my team. Yeah. Like, subconsciously, you just don't even think about that.
Right. And how many of those opportunities around our city, around our state, are like that? Yeah. And so then you say, okay, if you don't have that relationship, you're not getting that opportunity. So now we've closed some doors. I call them locked opportunities. Right.
I wasn't even aware of that was an opportunity for you. Right.
And so what I call that is a locked opportunity if you don't know somebody. And so then I kind of share in the TED Talk, which you can see is this idea of unlocking opportunities for people, right? My grandpa had a key to unlock that opportunity at that gas pump factory, and that key had a specific name, and that name was Ray Simmons, right? And so what I realized I got to move to the east side, 8, 9, 10 years ago. I was working in schools. I just wanted to be in the mix, I was like, getting to know these families and all that. And as I'm getting to know Demarion and others, I realized that in America, people are born with drastically different amounts of keys, right? There's people with lots of keys, with few keys. And so, what kind of happens and what has happened is that kind of people with the good jobs or with the good opportunities, or maybe another way to put it is like people with lots of keys to unlock opportunities kind of live with each other, around each other, and work with each other. And people with few keys live around and work with people with few keys. And so when opportunity comes, it's like, I just don't have as many keys. And so that's the conversation that has been really fun since the TEDx talk, is to kind of introduce kind of this new paradigm for one, telling your story, and then two, like, how is opportunity unlocked for people, and how as a city can we be known as a place that keys are kind of freely given? Because right now we are siloed, and opportunity is siloed, and I really want to break down or connect those silos.
Yeah. Well, and you look at like how do you be practical with, like giving advice to, like you said, you're around these kids and doesn't matter, even if they're on the east side, even on the south, doesn't matter, west side, it doesn't matter where they are. But if you meet someone, whether it's at work or whether it's, out in the football field or wherever, and they ask you that question, and you're subconsciously now, because they've heard your talk, like how do you basically give these kids more keys, right? How do you be proactive about that and think, like some of these kids don't get like transportation, right, or whatever it is. I mean, sadly, some of them are struggling for food. Like it's really, it's sadly, that's the reality. And, like I said, if you listen to my story and you're like, well, just, like I said, just get a job at a country club. Well, it's not that easy. I know there's a country club close to the east side. Twin Hills is probably the closest one. But at the same time, it's, and I'm thinking about now, like, all right, how do we get there? Right? How do you even like dress the right way to walk into a country club?
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance.
There's so much to it that like now I didn't think of.
Yeah.
Like, now I think of it. Now I'm aware of it.
Yeah, if you go to any urban school or kind of low income school in the middle of the school day, there's a high school on the east side, Douglas. If you go there, there'll be 8 cars in the student parking lot. And then you go to a school like in Bartlesville or the suburbs, and it's like we had to build an extra parking lot, right, for student parking, right? And so now we're talking about like how do young people access opportunity, right? I was driving to a mentor's house. I had access to positive people in my life who could invest in me. You could drive to the golf course. You can do these things, and so it really comes down to kind of that economics. Well, why doesn't their parents just buy a car? Why don't they go buy a car? It's like, well, these are kind of the and then moments that we're talking about. Is like, how do people get the good jobs that like pay well enough to be able to afford these things or be able to provide a car to your kid? So that was actually a question that I would ask in these interviews was like, hey, tell me about your first car. People love talking about that, right? It's like, I had this beat up Chrysler minivan that the left door wouldn't even close. We had that thing bungeed and all of that, but you had a car. But you had a car. Right. Yeah. It's like, well, I had to save up and buy my own car. It's like, well, tell me a little bit about the job that you had in order to save up, right? Well, I was mowing yards with my buddy's dad had a lawn company, right? And that's where I worked to save up that money to buy the car, right? And so even kind of that nuance of people getting and accessing opportunity is another nuance to the conversation that we don't often think about.
You're right. It's just not even in it's not even in the realm of just thought for us. Like, it's just so, like, because we've been trained, because we don't even think about that first level, right? Like the first step for us is, it's just ask a friend or ask someone's dad, right? It's not, before that, it's like, well, how do I know that person? And you talk about first car. My first car cost me $1,500. It was a 98 Nissan Altima, had 150,000 miles on it. I bought that first car with money that I had won from a golf tournament. I graduated university in May. A buddy of mine said, hey, I got a great golf tournament. It is, what's the holiday that's in May? Memorial Day, Labor Day weekend, is it Memorial Day? Whatever, Memorial Day weekend in May. Go down, and we play really good, and I came back with $1,500 in cash. I was like, wow, this is awesome, right?
For sure, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. But the guy who I played golf with who played at Oklahoma City. I played at SNU. We've become friends, and the company that he works for sponsored us to play in that golf tournament. So it didn't cost us a thing to play in that golf tournament. It's in New Mexico, and I go back every year. It's fantastic. And so a buddy, like that, right? I mean, a guy, the company he works for sponsors, because it was an all-field tournament, so every all-field sponsors a team. We go win. And we keep the money that we win. We're just representing them, right? They don't want the money. I'm sure they do, but they didn't get it because we won. So I come back, and then I reach out to my host family, who was, every kind of international student gets a host family. The uncle of the host family, who I actually call now Uncle John, said, I got a car for you. And I was like, great, how much do you want for it? And he was like, I don't know. Let me run it through like the Kelley Blue Book or whatever. And I think I come back with $1,500. I think I paid like $1,250 for the car. Right? But like you look at, like I said, you deep dive into the story, and you see these like, well, why did I even get that money? How did I meet Brian, my buddy? Like, and that's through golf and golf. Like that golf tournament cost a lot more than $1,500 to pay in, right? And we didn't pay for it, right?
Yes.
So just like you're right. There's so many of these moments, and so since the TEDx talk, then you have kind of been on the circuit of talking as many places as possible, and in companies and to all these people. Like, what are the practical things that kind of lessons learned that people listening can
Yes.
take into their lives, or even look at their own lives and be like, oh, how do I give my keys away?
Yeah. I think the first thing is really taking a deep dive into your own story. I think we so naturally kind of get caught up. We kind of forget, honestly, like as I've been speaking, I have people kind of process some of their and then moments, and some of the feedback I've been getting kind of in these sessions is like, Taylor, I haven't thought about these names in forever, right? As like some of these nuances I just haven't thought about, and so since I haven't thought about it, I don't really tell that in my story. And so I think naturally, as you kind of process, there's this level of humility that comes. And once again, I need to say, we're talking from a very like small percentage of America, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely speaking to a certain audience, but there's this kind of level of humility that comes to say, hey, I actually didn't do it all on my own. I didn't pull myself up by my bootstraps completely. I did work hard.
Yeah.
I did face challenge. I might have faced loss. I might had, a learning disability. I might have these challenges which are in everyone's life, and I don't want to discredit that in any way. But I just want to start telling the part of the story of the help that you did receive.
To start.
Right, to start. And so I think that sounds small, but I think it's actually really big. I think it takes time to process that. I think we need to tell our families the full story. If you have kids, maybe you don't even know your spouse's full and then moments, right? These are conversations that you can have. And so the hope is that a level of humility and empathy will come from that, which then in turn will say, how do I be and then moments for other people? And I think that looks completely different in every different context. So, I don't want to give examples, but it's like, hey, in the real estate industry, we could do this. In this industry, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could, part of this is exposure to young people of like, I didn't even know golf existed, right? Or I didn't even know this part of the city existed. And so being able to even expose kids to deciding what they want to do is key. So one is to process your story. Two is to kind of start evaluating your network and telling your story differently, inviting other people to tell their stories differently. And then two or maybe three, whatever number we're on, is to kind of think about in your context, how can we look outside of our kind of normal network of how we're doing day-to-day business and bring people who have historically been left out into what we're doing, right? So even in this podcast, right, of inviting younger people in who might not have access to equipment, and learning how to use, this equipment and getting those practice reps. Another concept I kind of share about is this idea of kind of lower stakes practice reps, of that growing up, you kind of get these chances to explore and do these things without the fear of like completely crashing and burning. And so what does it look like to create more practice reps for different kids in our city who don't get practice reps? So those are just a few of the things that kind of come to mind. I feel like when we tell our stories, I think that will unlock opportunities for more people to thrive.
I think so too. Going the other way, like how, if you meet someone, like how do you tell the kids, right, to who don't have opportunity, like how do you tell them, because that's also a thing too, right? You can teach the older generation to give back, but the kids have to be able to receive it and learn and see those opportunities. So how do you teach, through the podcast, like I got to meet some awesome people. So how do you teach the kids to reach out to those people and do it in a way that like makes it effective as well, right?
Yeah. I think one nuance to this before I kind of get into that, because I've gotten this question before and I've actually really been wrestling with it.
Yeah.
Is I wish we could tell all of our kids in this state the same thing.
Yeah.
And I grew up being told, if you work hard, if you are polite and you are interested in kind of do these things, then you'll be okay. Right, you'll meet the right people. You're kind of already in the so we go to church with these people. We do
We're
X,
already
Y,
in
and
the
Z.
system.
Right,
yeah.
And that's what I want to tell Demarion. I want to say, just be yourself, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you're hilarious. You're hardworking. You're fun loving. It's like you have this work ethic. You work 3 jobs right now. Like, just do you and explore and do all that. That's not a benefit that many of our kids in our city have. And so that's why I want to talk to the adults. to say, you guys are the opportunity holders. And so we get to set the rules.
Gotcha.
We get to decide who comes in and who gets to do certain things and who gets to sit where and who gets to do these things. That it's like, let's tell our kids to continue to work hard, to focus on their studies, to have fun, to do extracurriculars, to play a sport in high school, to do those things that we tell a smaller percentage of our kids in Oklahoma. I want to tell all our kids that, and then challenge us adults to say, hey, let's open this up. There's opportunity. We have enough keys. We're not going to run out of keys.
Right.
And let's allow other kids to walk through these doors.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're right. Because, the doors have got to be open in the first place. And, I think I saw probably something on Instagram. It was a clip, and it was like, the one thing that like is one biggest key to success, and it's connections. Right? It's not, when we look back, it's all of those and then moments. It's not, yes, it's part of working hard, but you look at, I think they looked at like, some study of like all these successful people, and they looked at their story, and they're like, it's all of those and then moments. It's all of the people in their circle that they like, that whole five people connection thing, whatever the quote is. It's true, right? But like you said, those people have the opportunity.
For certain people, yeah.
So how do you let less fortunate or whoever into those opportunity moments?
Yeah,
and that's the tough part.
That's the tough part, and I think there's a lot of history behind it of the reasons why we don't bump into people. We kind of live in our bubbles and all of that, and so I actually think it's kind of an issue of trust. We don't unlock opportunity for people we don't trust, so we just don't have enough trust building opportunities, right? These small things of like me golfing for 4 hours is a low stakes trust building exercise, right? It's like I can see if this person is trustworthy,
right.
The way that he or she acts, the jokes I learn about them is like, okay, this is not someone I want to deal with, or hey, I really like, and so that's a trust building opportunity, and so we need to create more of those across our city. To allow people from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses to be able to kind of start building trust in low stakes manners, because when it happens, it's always high stakes because it doesn't happen that frequently, and the dynamics change with that.
So how, like, being practical going forward, like, are you planning to host events and host kind of like the one thing the Oklahoma Hall of Fame does, and again, I have another and then moment of which I can dive into of how we even end up here today recording, but like one thing we do on our kind of young professionals board here is we have outreach events. So like 4 times a year, and this is outreach events so that we get people interested in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame and want to be on the board and stuff. But we basically go somewhere 4 times a year and have an Oklahoma Hall of Famer speak, and people come to the event, and that's an outreach event. Everyone invites a +1, right? Yep. Is there a way to do that in an and then moment situation, like capacity, right? You think of Colonel Stan Evans, right? He was one of our guests. JB, or Mayor Holt, or all these people, or even just business owners. Like, is there any way to post a monthly event that you invite, the guys to, right, or the group to? So then, because I'm just trying to figure out, is there a practical way to bridge that gap that's like, it's easy to tell the guy, the person with all the opportunity, hey, you've got to open your doors. And, but how can you create and facilitate that to make it easier for everybody? Because it takes work and time. It takes work and time. Is that a possibility?
And that's what people have to decide if they're going to step into. We have set up things right now where it's easy to kind of continue life as it is within our networks and all these things. And so, it's going to take a little bit of effort. And so the things that I've seen and the things to think about, and we can kind of wrap on this is if you want to create and then moments, there's also even dynamics within that, right? So we'll take your example is, hey, we want to invite some young people to our young professionals gathering. There's rules and kind of cultural norms within your gathering that people outside of those norms don't always understand. And so what I've seen is that people will come into that environment that they're not used to, and they'll do some faux pas, like some stuff will happen that's like, oh, I didn't know that was a rule, or I didn't know that. And the people who are normally there will kind of write them off. Oh, that was weird, or that was inappropriate. And so that person isn't really invited back, or it's kind of weird, or all of that. And so that opportunity kind of gets shut there because of that thing. I saw a funny video recently of a girl who brought her boyfriend to the house for the first time for dinner, and they all were in on it, the family, that said, hey, before we start eating, we're going to stand up and say the pledge.
It's hilarious.
And then we're going to turn around and sit down, right?
Yeah.
And so the video's on the boyfriend, and they all stand up, and he's like awkwardly like standing up and like trying not to laugh, and then they all spin, and he spins and kind of sits down. Is like, it's kind of like that, whereas like there are cultural norms and rules of how people do stuff, and how am I supposed to know if I've never been there? And the flip is for you or for other people. It's like, man, there's cultural rules. There's all this stuff in other communities that you're not involved in, right? There's rules at the Domino's table. There's things that you say or don't say, right? On the east side that most people or whoever haven't been over there wouldn't know those. But so those are the things that I think we need to be attuned to of if we're going to open this up, I think we need to be more gracious. We need to be more helpful. We need to have this like level of listening and understanding, and then maybe not even be as stringent with our rules and be okay with people, not wearing the exact right thing and things like that. I think that would be one of the small steps if we're going to take this to kind of open up and start building relationships, that let's evaluate what are kind of unspoken rules, and are we okay with people breaking them, and continuing to give opportunity in an empathetic and open way.
Yeah. And I think to do it effectively, you've got to go to the kids. Right? You can't just say, hey, come to the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, we're hosting an event. No, you got to go to them. You got to find a church in the east side or wherever we're going and just like host it there.
Yeah, I mean, there's different nuances. I think it's different for everybody. It's like there's people that you might work with, or there's relationships, there's organizations, the Urban Bridge, there's Freedom City, there's Restore, there's countless nonprofits who have existing trusted relationships that you could go through that avenue to kind of build those. I mean, it depends on who you're asking, right? So the other thing is, like, if we have another minute, so I've been on the east side for 8 or 9 years, and I've seen organizations come in and try to do this, and they promise these things, and then they don't follow through. Yeah. And so my question has been like, how long does an individual get punched and then not flinch? It's like, we had an organization come in, kind of a builder, say, hey, we're going to build this really cool building, and we want to give you this space to your neighborhood association. Kind of dream up something, right? Would you have computers? You guys can meet on your monthly meetings here. And then a few months later, he comes back and says, hey man, or he talks to the neighborhood, hey, the financials haven't worked. You guys are actually going to have to pay to like come here and like have this space, like rent it out. And so it's like, man, we can't afford that, right? It's like, we can't do that. That's one example. Yeah. And so how many of those, which has happened year after year for decades, of people coming in, hey, this is going to happen. It's not, I've only been there 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, and I've seen all of these things. And so there's even that dynamic to be aware of, that you aren't the first to try to build these and then moments. And so there's patience and time and trust that has to be built. And I don't say that to discourage. I say that to like just encourage in the intentionality, and that needs to be there as we're trying to unlock opportunity for others.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is generational. This is taking time. This is going to take a lot more time. It's not just a quick fix. Like, this is something that's going to be taking 50, 60, 100 years of and their moments, and people opening doors and making it accessible. And it's just, how do you start that in a proactive way, right? Instead of like, it's easy to tell everybody, hey, like, be, open opportunity to others. But if those other people aren't even in the room, then that's we got to keep going back and back and back to how do we get these people together? But no, it's I love what you're doing. It's been awesome to see, kind of since the TedX talk, you've just kind of like ran with it, right? And had that opportunity, and everyone's coming to you, and you're traveling and speaking, and it's not just in Oklahoma City that you're doing stuff. Like, you're kind of going over the country, which is awesome to see. So
I want to have that conversation, that nuanced conversation about how people become successful, about how we as leaders can unlock opportunities for others. And those conversations have been really cool. It's been cool speaking outside of kind of Oklahoma City, where it's like friends and family who are going to be nice, right? And you get in front of, like, I got to speak this last summer to people, complete strangers, which has been awesome. And getting that feedback has been really helpful as I'm kind of crafting this story for opportunity to be unlocked for others.
Yeah, sick. People listening, how do they get involved? How do they want you? First of all, how do they learn from you how to, you know, give away more of their keys, but also how do they reach out to have you come speak at their place of business or even just community?
Yeah, so I have a website called andthenmoments.com. That's a great place to go, and we can connect there, as well as I'm on social media, on LinkedIn, Facebook, TDoe or Taylor Doe, any of that, as well as I think you're going to link to the TEDx talk in the show notes, so we'd love for you to watch that and then have a conversation.
That's all it's about.
So,
thanks, man. Appreciate you coming down. I know you're super busy, and I appreciate you coming in. Like Taylor said, people listening, I'll put the links to everything in the description, so you can go there, check it out, and then moments.com, and we will see you next episode. Cheers.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by Hope is Alive. Hope is Alive exists to radically change the lives of drug addicts, alcoholics, and those who love them. Join us Saturday, September 30th for our Sobriety Sprint 5K as we remember, honor, and celebrate those who've lost their lives. This family-focused event will feature a 1-mile fun run, inflatables, food trucks, and more. Register to run or honor a loved one at sobrietysprint.com.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.